There are a lot of discussions going on about how to deal with the CR and the issue of Obamacare. And so we're continuing to work with our members.
Speaker John Boehner cannot catch a break. Days after the president announced that he would seek congressional approval for a strike on Syria, Boehner and Majority Leader Eric Cantor lined up behind their commander-in-chief.
I'm going to support the president's call for action. I believe my colleagues should support this call for action. We have enemies around the world that need to understand that we're not going to tolerate this type of behavior.
But a week later, Boehner is once again facing insurrection.
Clearly, members tend to reflect their constituents. The American people have not been supportive. He's not made the sale to the American people.
Almost two-thirds of Americans now oppose intervention in Syria, a 16% spike among Republicans in 1 week. Representative Tom Cole of Oklahoma, another member of House leadership, said it would, quote, take a road to Damascus experience to change his mind on Syria, a reference to the Apostle Paul's biblical conversion to Christianity while traveling to the Syrian capital.
I think the American people simply don't want to be involved in this kind of conflict when they don't see a compelling national interest or threat to the United States.
If Syria is proving a biblically uphill climb, Boehner's job is no easier when it comes to domestic concerns. Yesterday, the speaker was forced to withdraw a bill to fund the government because it could not pass his own caucus. So the bill stripped funding for the nation's health care law, the defunding provision was not tough enough for some House Republicans, who seem ready to shut down the government unless their demands are met. With only 6 legislative days left to negotiate with members of his own party, Speaker Boehner seems out of ideas. Asked how he might placate his caucus to avoid a government shutdown, Boehner chuckled and responded, "Do you have an idea? They'll just shoot it down anyway." Joining us now from Capitol Hill is Republican Congressman from Oklahoma's 4th District, Deputy Majority Whip Tom Cole. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us.
Alex, thank you.
So I'd like to begin with Syria. Congressman, we know that you are no fan of military intervention, but I ask you, given where we are today, are you in support of the talks we are holding with the Russians to potentially put the Syrian chemical weapons supply under international control?
Oh, certainly. I'd be delighted if that happens. I'd, like everybody else, have some degree of skepticism as to whether it can, but we ought to let the process work. And, there is some Russian interest in this. First of all, I don't think they want to be the sponsor of a client state that uses these type of weapons. Second, they have 25 million Muslims inside their own country, and they've had plenty of acts of terrorism within Russia itself. So the idea that these types of weapons would be floating around is something they've got a concern about as well. So this actually may be an area that we can work together and get something done.
Congressman, I think some folks, and especially those in the White House, would say part of the reason the Russians and the Syrians are sitting down to negotiate is precisely because there was the threat of military intervention that got them to the table. That said, Senator Bob Corker, who was in support of military intervention, said this about the president's leadership. He said, "There's absolutely no question President Obama is very uncomfortable being commander-in-chief. In personal meetings, he comes across very confident. I wish I could deliver a speech as well as he does. But it's like he wants to slip the noose. It's like watching a person who's caged, who's in a trap and trying to figure a way out." What do you make of those comments?
Well, first of all, I'm not convinced at all that the quote, threat of military force, which wasn't very credible by the time the Russians put their offer on the table, had much to do with this. And it was very clear that the president's proposal did not have the support of the American people and was not going to pass certainly the House of Representatives, but probably the Senate either. So I think the Russians acted, frankly, again, in their own interest. Again, they don't like being associated with this type of activity. It undercuts their reputation. I think that's why Putin's gone to such great lengths to try and say it was somebody else other than the Assad government. To your other point of, what does it say about the president's leadership? Look, I don't think this helped the president at all. I think the policy was flawed. I think, honestly, over the course of 10 or 12 days, he looked weak, he looked indecisive, and he looked hesitant. And I don't think projecting that type of image on the global stage is good for the president. I don't think it's good for the country either. I don't relish the fact that it happened, but there's no way you can look at this incident and think that the president emerged stronger in the eyes of the world.
I must, on the note of weak and indecisive leadership, I do want to get to domestic concerns because there's a lot of talk about just how weak and indecisive some Republican leaders may have been, and the question over whether the government is actually going to shut down in less than a month. Congressman, you and I have talked about your feelings over holding basically the budget hostage, not passing a continuing resolution unless the law of the land, Obamacare, is defunded. And I wonder what you make of the current sort of stalemate right now within the Republican caucus. John Boehner saying, do you have an idea? And effectively saying his own caucus, which is to say a fractious minority, would shoot any good ideas down anyway. What did you think of that statement? And are you confident that we can avoid a shutdown?
Well, I think we can avoid a shutdown. And first of all, I have a lot of respect and confidence in the Speaker, and so do the majority of his colleagues. But unfortunately, on the case of the CR, we couldn't get 218 votes. That doesn't mean we didn't have 180 or 190. So there's a considerable group of people that I think support the efforts of the Speaker and would have been very happy to vote for the plan that Majority Leader Cantor crafted. The problem is not the House of Representatives when it comes to Obamacare. The problem is the United States Senate. And we've demonstrated repeatedly that we can repeal it. We oppose it. We'd like to defund it. The problem is some of our colleagues in the Senate side simply can't do that, and they're trying to use the House to accomplish their own ends. I don't think that's particularly productive.
I mean, I think that's just sort of how it works. I mean, that's sort of the passage of legislation, and it seems like some members in the House don't understand that there's no way defunding Obamacare is going to get through the Senate. Do you have conversations trying to explain that to them?
Well, certainly, there's always a pretty vigorous exchange of views inside a Republican conference and amongst our various constituencies. We still have a considerable amount of time, and I think we can still reach a formula that can attract 218 Republicans and puts the Speaker in a strong negotiating position. I don't favor shutting down the government. I think, it's a self-defeating act, and it will probably backfire politically. But there's certainly things that can be done in the CR that, might put us in a stronger position and would move us closer toward the types of things that the Republican conference wants to achieve, but a Democratic Senate and a Democratic president make very difficult to accomplish.
Congressman, are you at all worried that the focus on the continuing resolution has sort of opened the gates to relitigating this fight over raising the debt ceiling, something that folks have said would be catastrophic to the American economy?
Well, budget agreements around debt ceiling increases are pretty common. That's actually when they happen. Democrats have used them in the past. And frankly, the one before last, you had a Democratic senator using this to extract an agreement to do the Simpson-Bowles Commission. So, that doesn't surprise me a great deal. I think we can negotiate there. I actually think our leverage is the sequester, which is in law and which I think Democrats have a great deal of difficulty accepting. And I think we can make some progress on long-term debt reduction, but in my view, shutting down the government's not the way to get there.
So just to be clear, so you think lifting the debt ceiling is a better moment to discuss and litigate these issues, including the defunding of Obamacare?
Well, I think you should put them all together. That is, we've got an end of the fiscal year at September the 30th. We've got a debt ceiling sometime in middle October, and we have the sequester as a continuing legal reality. I think what the Speaker's trying to do, and I think appropriately, is to get a window of opportunity between the end of the fiscal year and the end of the year, probably middle of December, let's say, and in that period, with all three of those elements on the table, negotiate a much larger package, and that package would be aimed obviously at trying to lower the deficit. And we've changed Obamacare 7 times and saved considerable amounts of money. There's a number of things in there that I think we could actually get bipartisan support. It might be possible to delay it for a year, but that's already been done for business. Why shouldn't it be done for individuals? It might be possible to get rid of the medical device tax. There's a number of elements where I would suggest there could be bipartisan agreement, but you have to have the time to do it. And I think dealing with these things, collectively at one time as opposed to individually, over a 3-4 week period is probably a better way to go. That's why you need the CR.
It sounds like
that 75 days.
It sounds like the debt ceiling is on the table. Oklahoma Congressman Tom Cole, it is going to be a wild ride. Thank you so much for your time.
It is indeed. Thank you.
Coming up, you may know him from his plans to burn the Quran on the anniversary of September 11th or from his promotion of an anti-Muslim film that sparked controversy around the world. But at this point, Pastor Terry Jones might end up being most most famous for his police record.